All right. So, Mike, just to start off, obviously, you guys put out the announcement today that you're up to 26,000 season ticket sales.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yes.
would, how would you kind of describe demand thus far relative to what you perhaps expected?
Relative to what I might have expected when we launched into this whole circumstance, it's been spectacular. And our fans, our folks have continued to renew. They've continued to buy new season tickets. Our students have responded favorably. So, year over year, we're actually, I think, 200 ahead where we were a year ago without any of this disruption going on around us. So I would tell you that in general, I'm really pleased and gratified that our fans clearly have expressed a desire for activity to happen in the fall and for them to be part of it.
Right. The number 25% was going around last week. That seemed to me like more of a sliding starting point than it did a ceiling. Correct?
Yeah. And so, we needed to pick something, to start with from a planning perspective, just to have a benchmark to sort of base our initial work off. And I wanted to start lower rather than higher because it's easier to scale up than it is to scale down.
Right.
So that's why we chose 25%. Also, because 25% really allowed a very strict, like one-to-one social distancing circumstance in the stadium, which is not how people come to games. People don't come one by one. They come in groups. They come as families. They come in other sort of self-selected groupings of people that you're going to want to allow to have happen. And so, just by definition, you would end up with more than 25% doing that. But we wanted to just pick a number to start with, and that's where the 25% came from.
Right. What all goes into the calculus in terms of deciding what percentage is going to be feasible?
That's a great question.
Like
if I had the answer to that, I'd be selling it around the country. At some point, you make a judgment and a determination based on your state, your region, your locale, what the evidence and data tells you in terms of where the virus is and how deeply it's how active it is in your particular area at a point in time. But there'll be guidance from the Big Ten. I'm sure there'll be guidance from the state. There'll be lots of different factors, I think, that will go into this. But above and beyond, or above all, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing is responsible, is doing your very best to provide a safe environment, not putting people unduly in any type of a risky situation, depending on what the circumstances say. If things improve dramatically, we don't kick off for 3 months, from tomorrow. So there's quite a lot of time yet for things to evolve and change. Our hope, obviously, is they continue to change for the better. That's the goal. But we can continue to adjust, I think, for quite some time before we have to draw a hard and fast, here's the number.
Right. Who all has a say in the matter?
Well, it'll be, obviously, at the end of the day, it'll be the leadership, President Daniels and our board and others will be the ones that ultimately will give the thumbs up here locally. But we'll also rely on guidance that comes from other sources. Obviously, we're residents of the state, we're residents of the county, and we want to make sure that we're doing things that are in line with the best thinking and guidance that those entities will present.
Right. Obviously, one of the big questions here will be, if you have limited capacity, who gets in and who doesn't? How do you make those choices?
Well, you and I get in first, and then after that, it's a lottery. So we've thought long and hard about that, and it's not an easy question. And without a doubt, there will be inconvenience and imposition on some people this year. It will, there's nothing about this year that looks like business as usual.
Right.
Not a single thing resembles what we're all used to and what we all would be comfortable doing. So, in whatever system we ultimately devise, someone's going to be unhappy. Someone's going to be okay with it. Someone's going to be unhappy. But our going in position, and I think we said it in the release we put out today, is our two priority groups will be our season ticket holders and our students. Those are the two groups that we are going to do everything possible to accommodate to the fullest extent possible. Now, from the season ticket perspective, is it possible that we would have to ask people to take, at the end of the day, maybe less tickets than they had ordered and would have in an ordinary year? We may have to do that in order to accommodate as many season ticket holders as possible. We think it's, again, that's a judgment call, and something that people can either agree or disagree with. But we've had tremendous growth over the last couple of years in terms of our season ticket base. It's really come back very strong, and I personally have a hard time telling any one of those folks that's willing to make that season-long commitment that you can't come at all this year because of the circumstances. So again, recognizing that there will be imposition on some and satisfaction on the part of others, we'll do our best to come up with what we believe is the fairest outcome given the circumstances. Again, knowing that we certainly hope this is a one-year blip, and then we get back to business as usual. It's something that we put a lot of thought into. We have the framework of a plan, but until we have to sort of call the question and settle in on a number and a quantity, it's probably not wise to put it out there at this point.
Right. So do you continue to sell up until capacity and then refund later if you have to, or do you cut it off at some point?
I don't think there's any point in cutting it off right now because, again, we don't know what capacity would be, and that might ultimately be an unwise situation. What we won't do is sell individual game tickets or mini season plans or all the typical things that we do in a normal year until we're certain that we have capacity to accommodate those things. So that's again why we've chosen at this point in time to say, hey, those folks that are able and willing to commit on a season basis and our students will be the two groups that are going to receive our first priority.
Right. Do you have a sense yet as to how social distancing can be applied to a football crowd at this point, or is that still kind of up in the air?
Well, so our initial 25%, as I mentioned, was based on a pure 6-foot social distancing, and our ticket folks in conversation with, first of all, in terms of many trips out to the stadium physically with tape measures and other things, and in conversation with our peers and colleagues all around the country, right, both college sports and professional sports, put together a plan that shows, every other row and seats and, all sorts of different things. I won't do it justice here, but there is a plan that shows what a 6-foot social distance crowd would look like or potentially could look like.
Right.
It's very doable. It's not unreasonable. It would clearly cause people to probably not always be in the section that they might typically be in. So we'd have to control capacity per section to allow for that distancing. But as science continues to evolve and data continues to evolve, it certainly appears that outdoor venues at this moment in time appear to be less likely and less risky from a transmission standpoint and all of those things. So whether or not a pure 6-foot social distance situation is what we're going to need in the fall, I think is very much still in question and still evolving. So we're hopeful that we can do better than that, but still have the ability for those that choose to do that to have spaces where that's possible. Excuse me.
Right. What's the part of game day operations that you wouldn't give a second thought to under normal circumstances that now all of a sudden is an outsized concern?
It's a great, travel on the concourse. Usually the concourse is sort of a every which way, and people, excuse me, pardon me, crossing over with each other. So we actually have established a plan where there would be specific directional lanes in the concourse. If you're going this way, you're over in this swath of the concourse. If you're going that way, you're in the other swath. If you're entering the stadium, you're in the interior circle just to be able to go into one of the seating sections. So it's, in ordinary circumstances, you let the traffic sort of just go where it is, go as it flows. But in this case, it's something that we feel like we need to control and provide a structure to, just to be able to provide, again, that sense of safety and responsibility and security that we're looking for.
Right. I would imagine you're pretty secure now in expecting there to be football now, as opposed to just kind of hoping there's going to be football, right? I mean, you feel like you're at a place now where you can actually start to lay plans in place.
Well, yeah, and we have, you can't plan for a season in a week. You got to be out in front of it. And I think, again, absent a significant downturn in conditions or, a drastic and dire reemergence in a significant way, I would tell you that I feel confident that we're going to play. I think again the crowd capacity and the stadium capacity issue will be one that we'll continue to work on. And again, from a flexibility standpoint, we can push that pretty late because we are going to go to completely digital ticketing this year, so we don't have to worry about lead time for printing and mailing and all those kind of things. It'll be all done digitally. There'll be no contact at the entrance gates. We'll have digital readers that people will put their own device on the reader, and there'll be no interaction there. So we've got, because of that, it gives us some date flexibility to make decisions sort of later, further down the line than ordinarily you might have to with printing and mailing and delivery issues.
Right. You just touched on a couple of questions I actually forgot to write down here. One, things like paper tickets, things like game programs, are they off the table this year?
Printed tickets are absolutely off the table, and that's the way the industry's going anyway. That's been all the entertainment, athletic, all the big events have started to move towards digital ticketing for lots of reasons. This sort of accelerated our move in that direction. Just sort of made sense to do it. For those that are absolutely unwilling or don't have a device or just want to have a ticket, we'll print out one of those generic looking deals for them, so that will be an option. But we suspect most people want to use a digital and
right.
ticketless or paperless option this year. Game programs, my guess would be a similar situation. I honestly I don't know if we've gotten into that conversation yet, and if we have, I just haven't. It hasn't gotten on my radar yet. But that's a great question.
Right. Is there a date where you have to have your percentage capacity locked in?
I don't know that we've figured out that there's a date yet. Again, since we don't play till September the 12th, I think that date is absolutely got an August time frame on it, but it needs to be far enough out in front that if we're going to have to trim anybody back or provide people less than or something different than what they've ordered, giving them a sense of what that might be so they can plan. We need to be fair from that perspective too. So I guess I would tell you that maybe a mid-August date might be the last reasonable and possible way to do that. But that's just me thinking that, figuring that out on the fly here.
Right. Is it possible you could, let's say, open the season at 35 to 40% and by mid-season be at 75%?
I think that's certainly possible. I think that absolutely could happen. Yes.
Pretty strange days, huh?
Oh man, strange doesn't do it justice.
Right.
Strange would be an improvement at this point.
Also wanted to ask you a little bit about the offseason. Obviously, you guys started things back up this week. Can you speak to the protocols in place at all in terms of making sure everybody's healthy and what happens if they're not?
Sure. And so there's, as you might expect, been lots of thought and planning going into what we began this week, which is a return over a 5-week period of 5 different teams. And I think you've seen what that is. It's football, men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, women's soccer, in that order. All sorts of medical clearance, enhanced screening on the front end, including testing for the virus, and no activity until positive or negative results have been received. Daily check-ins and temperature screenings, and answering a questionnaire about exposure or your own physical condition and health, and all sorts of things that will be just part of the new daily routine that our athletes will go through.
Right.
Significantly different access control with our facilities. Instead of just, hey, every door is open, you kind of come in where you want, go where you want. There is a way in and a single way out that's designated for all of our facilities at this point. Lots of areas are off limits. No locker room access at this point. No player lounge access. None of those social spaces are available to our athletes at this point. Workouts will be controlled in size and scope for lots of reasons, for safety reasons, but also in the event of a positive test at some point. The smaller the group, the smaller the contact tracing window and exposure and ripple effect that comes with it. So lots of thought that's gone into that. Cleaning protocols, both sort of real time and then at the end of the day, fogging and hydrostatic application of the most high-tech EPA approved cleaners to make sure all the spaces that have been used are sanitized. So all sorts of things, and there's a list that goes beyond that, but masks and all, masks at all times other than when they're involved in physical exertion activities, for our athletes, for our staff inside buildings and in public spaces. All of that is in place, and so far so good. We're only a couple days into it, but I think our experience to this point has been really good, and we're looking forward to getting the football crew at it, with their voluntary workouts in a more full-on way here come Monday.
Right. So if you have a positive, just get that player out of circulation, kind of contact trace everybody, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, as soon as we would have a positive test, or even somebody presenting symptoms, they would immediately be isolated, quarantined in a pre-designated place here on campus, where all students. There's been a facility put together to accommodate students in general. We would make use of that exact same facility for our athletes. Anybody that they had been in touch with would then be tested also, and until negative tests are returned, they would be held out of activity.
Right.
That was in their circle of contact.
Right. Can you say whether you've had any positives yet or not, or do you have the results in yet?
We have gotten a couple days worth of results, and I at this point we're good. No, all negative tests so far.
Is there? I'm sorry if I didn't hear you before when you were talking about this, but is there a group size maximum? Is it pods of 4, 5, 6, anything like that? Anything like that?
It's well, for the football group in the weight room at any one time, we've limited it to no more than 20, and I don't know that was our going in. Based on square footage and distancing and all that type of thing.
Right.
Don't know that they're even going to go to that number, but that was what we determined to be the appropriate max capacity at this point. And so they'll break the team down into groups that, again, no more than 20 would be in the weight facility at any point.
Right.
And we've got 20,000 square feet, so it's like 1,000 square feet per person, so it's plenty of room in there.
Right. Are there universal standards being handed down from the NCAA, Big Ten, whatever it may be, or are you kind of flying blind on not flying blind, but on your own?
There's guidance and guidelines and sort of best practices that have been laid out, and at both levels, at the NCAA level and at the Big Ten level. The Big Ten's got its own emerging infectious diseases advisory group, and they've issued to this point a playbook with best practices and recommendations. I would tell you that when that document came out, and every school has a representative on that group. We have a representative from Purdue that's participating on that group. That the plan and the protocols that we had put in place were very much in line and consistent, if not exceeding in some cases some of the recommendations. So we feel like we locally, our team had put together a really solid plan, and we believe we're following all the best thinking and guidance that's out there right now.
Right. From a budgetary,
just the other piece of it, Brian, before we brought our athletes back, so from a football perspective, because of the numbers, we had a call like this with all of our football student athletes, all of their parents. So we had a pretty good number, a couple hundred people on a call, and we walked through it was about an hour-long session where we walked through everything that we're doing, clearly communicated that, hey, this is still remains a voluntary period of time. You do not have to come back if you are at all uncomfortable or uncertain or feel like it's not quite time yet. That's perfectly fine. And it was I thought it was really good. I think it inspired some sense of confidence and appreciation for the thought and planning that had gone into this. And we had some good questions at the end, but they were all really all very procedural and right on target. There was nobody expressed at that point, a fear or concern about sending their son back to campus.
Right. That was actually precisely my next question. Was that obviously things are voluntary right now, but when you get to that point where it's non-voluntary,
Yeah.
there's a player or a family who says, hey, we're just not quite ready yet to come back out in the light of day.
Yeah.
What's kind of the opt-out mechanism there, if there is one?
Sure. And I think, it's one that I don't believe we'll have a whole lot of incidents of this, but if in fact we do, if somebody just, becomes, is having great anxiety and concern over the ability to return in a safe way, then this year will be one of those years where you're going to have to live with it. You're going to have to provide that opportunity and be understanding of that, uh, and not be punitive about it. And that's, so we would, again, for this year, that opportunity to, opt out in the event that someone just at flat can't see themselves, safely functioning in this environment is going to have to be made available. And that's again, that's a whole new world for us, but that's where we find ourselves at this point.
Right. Okay. I kind of asked this question more as a joke than anything, but all of this kind of weapons grade sanitation stuff you have to buy now, it sounds expensive. What does that kind of mean for the budget right now?
It means not good things, but the offset to it is, we have trimmed back and pulled back lots of other
Mhm.
activities and things that we ordinarily would do to try to provide a source to fund all that. But we've invested several hundreds of thousands of dollars so far in not only cleaning and hygiene and sanitation equipment and supplies, but also in additional game day. The digital scanners that I mentioned for ticketing, what was something that's very expensive. The hydrostatic sprayers that we're going to use for all the spaces was not inexpensive. So everything is added up, and it's well north of $300,000 or $400,000 right now, and that doesn't include testing costs, which are
Right.
not inexpensive either.
Right. As we've kind of talked about every few weeks here, as I've spoken to you about this whole ordeal, a lot of schools out there dropping sports, a lot of schools out there furloughing or laying off employees to make things work. Is the worst over for Purdue in that sense? Do you feel like you've gotten through that period of time where you're at risk of those things? I know the university is going to the end of June and whatnot, but
Right.
is all that stuff, are you through those waters now?
No, I would say we're not through them. I would say that we have been able through the end of June, like the university, to maintain, full everything. Full. We haven't had to make any personnel adjustments or any such thing. But as we roll into the new year, beginning July 1, lots of that will continue to be dependent on how this year evolves. And again, I wish I had a crystal ball to know for sure how that was going to be. If we're able to resume a reasonably normal level of activity and have reasonably substantive crowds in our football and basketball venues, we'll still see disruption for sure. And we presented a budget at this point in time that has roughly a $10 million downward revenue adjustment based on what we believe will be the circumstances this year. Again, that is our best guess at a moment in time, not knowing exactly how the year is going to play out, how future NCAA distributions or media rights distributions may or may not be affected. Can't know any of that at this point, but based on just the knowledge that will certainly be impaired to some level from a ticketing, from a concessions, from all the things that sort of spill off of a more capacity crowd will be reduced at some level. And so we're working under that framework at this point. If it gets worse, if conditions do not continue at this level or get better, if things get worse, we'll have to take more drastic actions. And at that point, we would be unfortunately having to consider lots of the other things that you've seen
That you don't want to consider, right?
Do around the country.
Right. We've obviously talked a lot about football for a lot of obvious reasons, but basketball is an indoor sport. It's right on top of flu season. Have you started putting any thought into what basketball season might look like?
We have not yet.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's in our minds, and we tangentially think about it, but it's a significantly heavy lift to try and figure out the football. It's an all day, every day activity at this point for our folks, and to add another layer while we're still trying to understand what this is going to look like is is probably not, it's just not realistic at this point. Now that will come for sure, and it's hugely important to us in every way. But yeah, it'll present a whole different set of circumstances because it is an indoor venue, because it is a very tightly packed venue when it's at capacity, and not knowing what the medical environment will be at that point in terms of virus presence. I mean, the virus will be present, but what's its penetration at that point in time, and what are the medical mitigations that may have evolved by that point in time? We don't know that yet, and so I think a lot of that will be influential as to what basketball might look like.
All right. What about volleyball?
Same thing. One of the things we're looking at in volleyball is the possibility of a venue change, moving from Holloway, which is a great. I mean, I love Holloway. We all, team loves Holloway, and in ordinary circumstances, we'd love to be able to play in Holloway, but it may be something there. We're evaluating what it might look like to move it into Mackey at this point, where you can have a more distance situation and still accommodate a good portion of our regular fan base. And so that's a possibility. We have not made a final determination on that, but it clearly presents a challenge, because it's going to be played indoors one way or the other.
Right. And then just the one last thing I wanted to ask you. The last time I spoke to you, you said that the video board might be ahead of schedule, finishing in July. Is that still?
Yeah. It is. We actually, it is coming along really well, and looking more imposing by the day, in a good way, in a very good way. I think we have training scheduled at this point during the week of June 22nd. So that means if you're going to have training, that means there's going to be a board that will, for all intents and purposes, be up and reasonably functional. So that to me is a really good sign. This thing was originally scheduled to be done in August, and if we're going to be training the third week in June, I think we'll have probably a fully operational board sometime in mid-July, which is again a full month ahead of what we had originally thought. So it's been great. The contractors have been great. Weather has been extremely favorable, and it is moving right along.
And the important part is it looks like you're going to be able to use it.
Yeah, exactly. That is the other good part, is that it's not just going to sit there and gather dust this year.
Right. Well, great, Mike. I think that's all I had for you, man.
All right, bye. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Hang in there.